So gender expertise is an interesting new phenomenon that has established itself in the international organizations, I would say particularly with gender mainstreaming since the 1990s. And there has traditionally been an argument that feminists have made and a concern that feminists have had that the creation of that expertise amounts to a co-optation of feminism for other purposes in the international organizations. I think that the worry is legitimate, but I also think that it is necessary to look more closely at the phenomenon of gender expertise itself, to look at what exactly gender expertise actually is, and then to also ask ourselves what is it that gender expertise and different types of gender expertise what they do. One of the interesting things to recognize when one looks closer at what gender experts do, what gender expertise is to recognize that it is actually relatively conflictual. So there is a lot of internal tensions among different types of gender experts in terms of about how they argue one should be conceiving of what the problems are to be solved in international organizations and how one should be solving those problems. And those tensions are along the lines that we sometimes are familiar with in academia also, of whether one should rely on positivist insights about what the truths are in the way in which gender matters to security, for example, or whether one should use more reflexive approaches. There also is a lot of struggle over the use of the term feminism. Should gender experts consider themselves to be feminists, self-identify as feminist, or is feminism rather something that delegitimizes them? So can they use the word, and when they use the word, will they not implicitly reveal themselves to be people who are too political and therefore not real experts? So there's tensions around that. There's tensions around North-South relationships between experts that come from the South, experts that come from the North, or are located in the South and are located in the North, and the kind of idea that the real expertise comes out of Geneva and New York and those places, but not out of other places, and so on. So I think if we take seriously the phenomenon of gender experts and gender expertise, it is actually important to interrogate these what I would consider power politics that are happening within the field itself, and that tells us, I think, a lot about what expertise is and also what expertise can accomplish. Well, gender mainstreaming is a very demanding strategy, actually. I mean, it's basically the idea that one can change the state from the inside out. So if one gets the bureaucracy to embrace gender issues, is the implicit idea that you would actually change policies and you would therefore change the way in which gender relations are organized in societies. It strikes me that in the area of peace and security, that challenge is even bigger. Because there is, I think in many places still, this implicit, commonsensical assumption that security has nothing to do with gender, right? Everybody is insecure, everybody gets killed similarly, and so on. So it's also not surprising that gender issues or that the security issue was mainstreamed relatively late overall. If we think about gender mainstreaming happening in development, for example, already in the 1970s, it was only in the 1990s that the issue got into international relations, and then you have the 1325 agenda only emerging in the 2000s. So this is a relatively new and a recent phenomenon. It's also a phenomenon that lends itself, I think, disproportionately to being co-opted. to starting from the assumption that if we only include women into the military, into the police, into the diplomatic service, we have accomplished something that is actually a feminist goal of women's empowerment or transformation or whatever you want that goal to be. I think it's much more difficult to mainstream gender into security issues in a transformational way, because what it would entail is opening up the field of the state and democratizing the state, including institutions that are intrinsically hierarchical, such as the military and the police. So I do think that this is a particularly difficult field. It's a field, interestingly also, if we think about expertise, it's the one field where IR scholars and feminist IR actually appears as the experts. And I don't think it's surprising that so much feminist IR is really heavily theoretical, precisely because it recognizes the importance of destabilizing a whole set of assumptions that we take for granted in the security arena in order to be able then to really transform gender relations by integrating gender relations or gender considerations into security apparatuses. So I do think it's a particularly difficult field to gender mainstream, and it is one that is going to require a lot more theoretical thinking in order to be really successful. On the one hand, I think we are rightly all horrified by the rise of conservatism, because conservatism so often implies a clash with precisely the values that we as feminists have, and they're values that are very often anchored in certain liberal understandings of rights. And they're values that I think in part clash sometimes with conservative values, because the conservatives start from the importance of the community, the importance of the family, the importance of the nation, and linked to an understanding of the harmony of these groups is a certain understanding of what a proper gender order is. So conservatism is very often very, very patriarchal. It's something that seems to be logically going together. Well, what to do in a context like that? I have some hope for the fact that gender equality issues have been institutionalized in different places, and not just inside the state, but also inside universities, so that we have gender studies programs, so that we have been able to insert certain ideas also into mainstream them into other programs. So I think there's sites of resistance today that exist in various societies, and what they are differs obviously by country, but in a condition where basically the political elites are no longer available as a source to help promote change. I think it is necessary to fall back into these other spheres and think about where are potential sites of resistance that need to be had, and which of these sites are the most effective. I'm reminded a little bit also, if I speak from the perspective of Geneva and from the perspective of thinking about the UN, in political negotiations today, it is very difficult to push gender issues forward in any way. And there's a big discussion right now going on, actually, because the Committee of Jurists is negotiating a new draft treaty on crimes against humanity. And the question, as feminists, we've posed ourselves perhaps is this an opportunity to provide a new definition of what gender means, that it doesn't just mean men and women, but that it's a fluid concept and that it's a socially constructed concept. The danger is, of course, that the committee of jurists is probably going to be very sensitive to that, because they're experts. There are legal experts that draft treaties. But once it gets into the political arena, that is the question: can a new proposal along the lines that some feminists have in mind be passed in the current situation? That's a very, very big question mark, and I'm not entirely sure how far this whole initiative is going to go beyond drafting and inventing new options for how one could rethink the topic. So these are difficult times, but they're not times where everything is lost. I think the point is to find the places where we can find solidarities and continue to destabilize gender, which is, I think, what it is all about.